I'm honored to have the opportunity to share some perspectives with such a distinguished panel and audience. What I'd like to share with you as a whistle-stop tour and very quick overview is what are the current challenges, why technology ethics suddenly come to the fore. Is this a fad or is it a transient event like we have seen, like business process re-engineering suddenly become popular and 6 months later we moved on to some new challenge. So that's a quick overview of what I like to cover basically in this quick presentation. What are the challenges of technology ethics? A quick look at a series of standards IEEE has initiated over the past 3-4 years to dabble into specifics of technology ethics. And then I like to just focus a bit more on an initiative which is roughly 18 months old under the ethics certification program. Now, if you're interested in technology ethics, whether you're interested or not, you probably hear these because now these are the fashionable stuff people talk about, largely worried about loss of our agency and autonomy when it comes to autonomous systems and deep learning machines. There are a number of areas that people have concern about. Algorithmic bias that comes either from data or the algorithmic design is one concern. Matters of ethical transparency, matters of ethical accountability in terms of responsibilities and roles, matters of ethical privacy. And there are many of these. I'll probably touch on some of these later, a bit more depth. And the old-fashioned friends, we have safety and security. These roughly contain the universe of technology ethics. IEEE, having started a while ago, probably now 4.5 years, initiated something called Ethically Aligned Design, which is treatise published last March on what technology ethics is about, 3 fundamental pillars of human values, self-determination and agency, and dependability of technology. And these are split into 8 general principles, and the Ethically Aligned Design is the first global publication that went live as a final or first edition almost a year ago, 14 months ago. And it is available for free from IEEE for anyone interested in these disciplines to have a look at. It covers the spaces that I've highlighted: human rights, matters of well-being, data agency, effectiveness, transparency, accountability. Some of these actually then became specific areas of focus down the line. The next area I like to quickly reference here is what's called the P7000 suite of standards that handle various dimensions of technology ethics. It starts with P7001, 7000, which I'm honored to have been involved with for longer than 3 years, 3.5 years now. And hopefully we are verging towards finalizing and publishing. This is trying to bring technology into ethical values, or vice versa, bring ethical values into design and conceptual thinking of technological solutions by bringing human dimension, ethical, philosophical values into the game, whereas provisionally has been price, efficiency, quality, reliability, and other parameters. So we are basically bringing new dimension into design. And it fundamentally starts by looking at a mission analysis and identifying what are the purpose of the product or service, identify ethical values that are relevant to that product and potentially undermined by that product, and then starts going through guidance on how to use a risk-based, value-sensitive design. So it's a kind of implementation of EAD, which is high-level treatise in practical engineering terms. There are a whole raft of other P7000 series family of standards in the making. Some have been in the making for well over 3.5 years, getting on to 4 years, dealing with algorithmic bias, matters of specific transparency, matters of, we had one recently withdrawn on facial analysis, facial recognition, but the only one which is published is 7010, which is on well-being metrics as a standard. The others are various stages of development, and hopefully see them in the next probably 6 months or so. What I like to focus on more is how can we go about understanding ethical characteristics of products and services towards some form of assurance, and beyond that, if people are interested, independent scrutiny, independent due diligence, and certification. Now, this was a program that IEEE started under the banner of Ethics Certification Program for Autonomous and Intelligent Systems, or ECPAS, ECPAIS for short. We had a remit of developing criteria addressing accountability, algorithmic bias, and transparency. Now, you might immediately question the list of standards I showed you already covering some of these. So why was IEEE already duplicating this effort, having been working on developing standards? Why do we need another version on ethical transparency in terms of certification? I hope what I described would gradually provide an answer to that as we go along. So starting with accountability in terms of being able to feel responsible and account for key decisions in the course of design, development, conceptualizing, to all the way to delivery of autonomous and intelligent-based solutions. The ECPAS program, with a panel of experts focused on issues of ethics, technology, and accountability, developed a mind map-based approach, which I'm illustrating here as an example. And unfortunately, the time is too short to elaborate how the approach worked. But nevertheless, this was the approach that we adopted to create all the parameters from a greenfield site, no assumptions, no, if you like, emulation of existing frameworks, etc. Started with purely group wisdom of the panel of experts, created all the parameters for ethical transparency, evaluation of product or service. Similar effort in transparency and being able to explain and be open and honest about how the product is being designed or purposed and developed. And the ECPAS program had a separate independent panel of experts who focused on matters of ethical transparency of autonomous and intelligent systems, or AI systems. And finally, algorithmic bias that you have invariably heard about, that could arise from random or deliberate intent in algorithmic systems such as AI, learning capabilities. And again, we our panel, a separate expert panel focused on how do we identify areas that require scrutiny and evaluation towards delivery of a certificate to a owner or developer of a product or service. The difference between these criteria and traditional standardization is that the criteria are about emergent properties that you see in a product or service, whereas standards tend to effectively teach you a process, like a cooking recipe. You follow the standard, and the other difference is that the standard never guarantees if you follow the process, you're going to get the outcomes that you are aiming for. So if you're aiming to design a safe system, they tell you this is current wisdom about designing safe systems, but we can't guarantee if you follow this, you're going to end up with a safe system. The certification criteria in the three categories of transparency, accountability, and bias that we developed last year at a very high speed, fast track process, in parallel, believe it or not, took 6 months. A typical standard would be anywhere between 2 to 5 years, and I've been involved in standardization as well at European and international level. So I know the challenges. Typically, what has emerged from the ECPAS program is a set of criteria which are structured like, here is the concept, this is the requirement, and whether the requirement is normative or informative, at what risk level would you apply this requirement, what kind of evidence would we expect from the designer or duty holder, and who are the stakeholders in that requirement. So that's the illustration of ethical criteria coming from the mind maps. So the mind maps are harvested and translated into a specific criteria, very detailed, useful for those who design or want to measure characteristics. Currently, we have finished those 3 areas, and since early 2020, we are involved in some pilot projects that I quickly reference a couple of them here. We're also developing a training program for technology ethics, largely focused on our approach to development of the ethical criteria for technology. The pilot programs currently are in 4 distinct areas. I wish I was there to listen. I sincerely apologize. It's my loss indeed not to have been there earlier to listen to all the distinguished speakers and to talk about COVID-related thing by Arthur Kaplan. But nevertheless, we have one initiative in that direction as well, which I'd like to share with you. So the pilot program that's ongoing at the moment is one evaluation of AI in public services. That's ongoing. This is through a duty holder as a major global city. We are evaluating one of the AI-related solutions against our criteria. And they are very well engaged, very well involved. And one of the reasons I was late, I was running one of those online sessions with this particular global city, very progressive, very forward-looking people who want the AI solution certified for ethicality, rather than just say, we run the city, we make decisions ourselves, we'll worry about the risks later. We are looking at developing ethical privacy criteria. So that's the second initiative that we're running, because the other 3 that we developed last year don't directly, more or less, address or tackle adequately the privacy matters. This is not GDPR stuff. This is ethics of privacy rather than legal conformity damage. We have started roughly 9 weeks ago a COVID-19 related initiative to try and identify ethical parameters as far as transparency, accountability, and privacy of contact and proximity tracing technologies. So that particular project has already delivered its first outcome, believe it or not, in less than 10 weeks. We have managed to put together a reasonably sizable body of ethical parameters that governments, health authorities, city-states, even private and public bodies can check themselves and be sure. And the fundamental reason for this is to gain public acceptance and trust, because most of the failures of contact tracking and tracing technologies are due to public's concern about transparency, about what happens to their data, about abuse of technology, etc. And we've got one project as far as understanding of matters of algorithmic bias and regulations in the financial sector. Now, very quickly on the contact tracing, which is our current project, we started this purely as an altruistic and for the benefit of humanity initiative, to the point that we ran it even over the weekends. The panel of experts participated late nights and weekends, and we have managed that around 2 weeks ago, we delivered our first report, and we're already working on the second report. So this is a set of criteria that would empower organizations, whether being a government or a city-state or even a private enterprise or a city authority. How do we gain public's confidence and trust in rolling out this piece of technology to enable us to get back to some form of normality in terms of economics and so on. The report was published late last week. This report is now available on IEEE website that I'll share with you. And people, it is basically shared on a Creative Commons basis globally with everyone, governments, enterprises, and public and private enterprise. We have got in this particular fast track outcome from our initiative 55 ethical criteria in these 6 classes, from focusing on organizational governance that sits behind contact tracing, all the way to potential for misuse of the system, either misuse of the data or the system, or hacking or obfuscation dimensions, etc. All of this has come in a matter of, believe it or not, less than 10 weeks. The white paper is already on IEEE. People can go to a website that's the bottom of the screen and take a copy. The idea is the feedback channel is also indicated there. We are seeking, putting it to global view, seeking feedback. But I would emphasize that this particular work is a partial work, but it was so urgent to come up with solutions to improve the take-up and effectiveness of contact tracing in the light of its global impact on economy, on lives, on well-being of human societies. We didn't want to waste time, wait until the whole work is complete. So we are sharing the interim result, and the full work would be that, roughly 2 months away. Again, that with the magnanimous decision indeed by IEEE SA and Konstantinos that you mentioned, Uli, we are sharing it for free with all global stakeholders. Now, why does technology ethics actually matter these days, and why should people worry about ethical assurance? First of all, inevitably, the matters of uncertainty, especially when we come to autonomous intelligence system, learning systems, and worries about a violation of our rights, whether they are ethical values or human rights. We don't know. We don't want to tread into those territories blindfolded. Then it's matters of responsible innovation. What does responsible innovation mean? And I think tackling the ethics dimension is a fundamental side of corporate social responsibility. Then obviously we do need some independence in this matter, hence IEEE's view of developing these criteria as an independent entity to provide some form of, if you like, scrutiny of duty of care, independent from the duty holder, being it the government or commercial enterprise. That scrutiny obviously highlights the strengths and holds of a particular product or service when it comes to social values, makes recommendations, and should people then comply adequately with fixing the problems that have been identified through assessment, they would end up receiving some form of recognition certification. And in a sense, the certification, as much as it might have some commercial PR value for the enterprise or the government behind the product or service, is also a kind of a measure of trust that the product was independently scrutinized, evaluated, and assured through corrections. Therefore, the people, in a sense, are trusted, and that service is trusted, such as contact tracing. Here's the ethics certification program, earlier press release that was done in February 2020, when we came up with the first series of transparency, accountability, and algorithmic bias certification criteria that are being piloted as we speak. And this is the call for our contact tracing applications and technologies. That call is live now, and people have till 1st of September to download a copy of the report, to critique it, to give us the benefit of their wisdom, the insights and knowledge, because all of this is intended as a philanthropic effort, if you like, for the benefit of humanity. We are sharing it globally with no IP protection whatsoever on behalf of IEEE. Thank you very much for your attention. Apologies for such a fast pace of delivery, but such is the availability of time and energy these days. Thank you, Uli.
Thank you very much, Ali, for that kind of fast forward run through weeks and months, or some probably years of development. What you probably don't know, since you were not witnessing the first part, yesterday we signed a cooperation agreement between HPI and IEEE as a first LOI step, and then MOU is the next, and then we get into more details after that. And that is also the GDTA is involved, so the Global Design Thinking Alliance, and we spent quite a time already during the day to get the design thinking community, make them aware, make all of us aware of what you're doing since several years now, and what is to expect at the end of the year, hopefully beginning of next year as a new standard. And we now start probably tomorrow when we have our members meeting, we start already the discussion and how can we do that at different parts of the planet, what kind of contribution we could deliver to this kind of first agreement. And I'm looking forward to the cooperation. I think we have a little bit of time still before we have to move to the other. I think it's about 5 minutes. I'm just checking if there is some thing in the chat right now already. If not, I have two questions actually. One, we started discussing on the phone some weeks ago when we met first time about the Corona app, which was under development at that time in Germany, the German version. And we had one of the responsible people of SAP in the morning, also here at one of the panels. Looking at your criteria you have set up and comparing that to the outcome, which is not the final thing, it's constantly further developed. So, but would you think that is already in line with your thoughts, or where would you see where do you see the missing standard at the beginning?
I have to admit that there are many competing solutions, some even being sort of rolled out, such as the one in Finland early August. So it's amazingly dynamic scene. Various governments have learned the hard lessons, haven't done their homework well, have tried and failed. So they've gone back to the drawing board and redesigned, restructured. The thing I know about the new German app, and believe it or not, I was in Germany last week and I downloaded it and ran it on my own mobile phone just to get the feel of it, because we don't have the blessing in the UK for a UK specific solution, again, because of similar kind of reasons, not entirely to do with incapacity to design an application, but how to gain public trust in rolling it out. I think the distributed architecture that has been adopted in the German solution is one of those fundamental. What do you do with people's private data? Which aspects of their data do you access are fundamental to gaining public acceptance and trust. It doesn't matter who the authority is, the health ministry or the whole government on behalf of the nation. Some nations, I won't mention, have had dismally poor response because their governments, in a rush to restart the economy and remove the lockdown, just forgot about how to gain public trust. And these nations I won't mention are in Western Europe, and they got 3% uptake. So out of all that investment in social capital, in physical capital and publicity, even though people are desperate to go back to some form normality of life, they just couldn't bring themselves, because of the way it was approached and fed to the public, to adopt it. I understand from my German colleagues that the new German app, even though it's not wholeheartedly endorsed, none of them are indeed, is far more successful than his first attempt. So definitely going in the right direction. But the suite of ethical criteria that we have tackle many dimensions of these advanced technologies, from the governance and competence matters on humans to design thinking issues to having a well-defined concept of operation, architecting, devising, monitoring, risk, real-time risk management. There are so many dimensions that, to be honest, to be objectively looking, and I have always highlighted that you don't need to get a certificate before you go to launch. Like you don't have to prepare yourself for a match, but if you prepare yourself, you stand a better chance of winning. So even the public application of contact tracing that already in use would benefit from basically scrutiny and polishing of the act and better communication with the public and more transparency and accountability and observation of ethical privacy on top of GDPR. I think the German solution has gone in the right direction. It's got much better take up and adoption rate than first version. Other countries haven't done as well, unfortunately, because they either ignored it or didn't even end up developing a internationally multi-interoperable solution. So that's where we are. We're hoping in less than 2 months from now, our final set of criteria will be available. And because these are available globally for free, anyone can download it and self-check themselves.